The thing about Max was that he never shut up. From the moment I adopted him 3 years ago, that golden retriever had an opinion about everything. The mailman, squirrels, the wind, his own reflection. So when he went silent, I knew something was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday night in October. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when Max suddenly stopped mid. He'd been going at something outside the window, the way he always did around dusk. Then nothing. Just this awful, complete silence. I looked up from my work. Max stood frozen by the window, every muscle in his body rigid. His tail, usually wagging with neurotic energy, hung straight down. His ears were pinned back against his skull. I called softly. He didn't respond, didn't even twitch. His eyes were locked on something outside, something in the darkness beyond the glass. I couldn't see what had captured his attention. I stood up and walked over to him. My hand touched his back, and I felt him trembling. Not shaking like when he was excited, but trembling like prey that knows the predator is close. "What is it, boy?" The streetlight outside flickered. In that brief moment of darkness, I thought I saw something move, something tall and wrong, standing at the edge of my yard. When the light came back on, there was nothing there. Max remained frozen. I tried to coax him away from the window, but he wouldn't budge. His breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps. His eyes had gone wide, showing too much white. I'd never seen him like this. Finally, after what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 minutes, Max backed away from the window. He moved slowly, keeping his body low to the ground, never taking his eyes off the glass. He retreated to his bed in the corner and curled into a tight ball. For the first time since I'd known him, Max was completely, utterly silent. I tried to shake off the unease. Dogs got spooked sometimes, right? Maybe he'd seen a coyote or a bear. We lived near the woods, after all. These things happened. But that night, as I tried to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Max had looked. The terror in his eyes, the absolute stillness of his body, and the silence. God, the silence was worse than any barking had ever been. 3 days passed before I realized Max hadn't made a sound. Not a single bark, whine, or even a contented sigh. He ate his food without enthusiasm. He went outside to do his business and came right back in. But he never barked. He never played. He just watched. Every evening at dusk, Max would position himself by the window. He'd sit there, statue still, staring out into the growing darkness. His body would tense, that same trembling I'd noticed the first night. I tried everything. I took him to the vet, who found nothing physically wrong. I threw his favorite ball, but Max just looked at it with sad, distant eyes. I offered treats he'd always gone crazy for. Nothing worked. "He seems traumatized," the vet said. Like he witnessed something that scared him badly. Animals can develop PTSD, just like humans. Give it time. But time didn't help. If anything, Max got worse. He stopped sleeping. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find him sitting in the living room, facing the window, watching. Always watching. His eyes would be open, unblinking, fixed on something I couldn't see. I started closing all the curtains at night. It didn't matter. Max would still sit there, staring at the covered windows as if he could see right through them. My neighbors started asking questions. "What happened to Max?" Mrs. Chun from next door asked one morning. I used to set my watch by his evening barking. Now it's so quiet. "He's not feeling well," I told her. It was easier than trying to explain something I didn't understand myself. That night, I decided to stay up and watch. I wanted to see what Max was seeing. I needed to understand what had changed him so completely. I positioned myself in the recliner with a view of both Max and the window. I left one curtain partially open. The streetlight cast long shadows across my front yard. Max took his usual position at 8:30, right as the sun disappeared. His body tensed. His breathing changed, and then he started that trembling again. I watched the yard, watched the street, watched the shadows. For an hour, I saw nothing unusual, just the normal suburban night. A car passing. A cat slinking along a fence. the wind rustling the trees. But Max never relaxed. He stared with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Then, at exactly 9:43, the street light flickered, and in that moment of darkness, I saw it. It was tall. Impossibly tall. The shape stood at the edge of my property, right where the grass met the street. It didn't move when the light came back on. It didn't disappear. It was still there. My brain struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. The proportions were all wrong. The arms hung too low, nearly touching the ground. The head was too small for the body, or maybe it had no head at all. And it was looking at my house, at my window. At Max, at me. I felt ice water pour through my veins. My hands gripped the arms of the recliner so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to look away, to run, to do anything but sit there frozen, just like Max. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I couldn't make out any details. It was like trying to focus on smoke, on shadow. The moment I thought I could see what it was, my eyes would slide away. But I knew it was there. I knew it was real. Max made a sound then, the first I'd heard in days. A low, broken whimper that cut right through me. It was the sound of absolute despair, of a creature that had been broken by fear. "It's okay, boy," I whispered. But we both knew it wasn't. I don't know how long we sat there. The thing never moved, never came closer, never left. It simply existed in that space between the streetlight and my yard, watching. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up on shaking legs and pulled the curtain closed. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely grip the fabric. Behind me, Max whimpered again. I turned to find him staring at me with eyes that held knowledge I didn't want to share. He'd been trying to warn me. He'd seen it first, and now he knew I'd seen it too. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my bedroom with the lights on and the door locked. Max curled up against my legs, still trembling, still silent. Every few minutes, I'd hear something, a soft scraping sound, like fingernails on wood, or footsteps on my porch, slow and deliberate, or breathing, deep and wet, right outside my window. But when I worked up the courage to look, there was never anything there. Morning came eventually, as it always does. The sunlight should have brought relief, but it didn't. Because now I knew. Now I understood what Max had been trying to tell me. Something was watching our house. Something that existed in the space between light and dark, between seeing and not seeing. And Max, who had seen it first, had gone silent because some things are too terrible to bark at. I called in sick to work. I couldn't leave Max alone, and I couldn't pretend everything was normal. My hands shook as I made coffee, spilling grounds across the counter. I needed answers. I needed to understand what I'd seen. I started with the internet, searching for anything that might explain the figure. Tall shadows, strange entities, unexplained sightings. The search results were a mix of conspiracy theories and creepypasta. Nothing concrete. But then I found a forum, a small community of people discussing unusual experiences. And buried in a thread from 6 months ago, I found something that made my blood run cold. A user named ShadowWatcher73 had described seeing the exact same thing. The tall figure at the edge of their property. The way it appeared when lights flickered. The way their dog had reacted. My dog saw it first. They'd written, German Shepherd, Brabbeasel, never afraid of anything. After that night, he wouldn't bark. Wouldn't go outside after dark. 3 months later, he died. Vet said his heart just stopped. Said it looked like he'd been scared to death. The post had no replies. I scrolled down, looking for more from ShadowWatcher73, but there was nothing. Their account had gone silent after that single post. I found 2 more similar accounts. Different cities, different times, but the same story. A tall figure, a dog that saw it first. Silence. One of the accounts belonged to someone in a town just 40 miles from me. I picked up my phone with trembling hands and sent a private message to that user, hoping they were still active. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I grabbed my keys. "Come on, Max," I said. "We're going for a ride." Max lifted his head but didn't move. The eager dog who used to lose his mind at the word ride just stared at me with those sad, knowing eyes. "Please, boy, I need you with me." Finally, reluctantly, Max stood and walked to the door. He moved like an old dog, though he was only 5. The life had been drained out of him. We drove to the library. I needed information that wasn't on the internet. I needed history, local records, anything that might explain what was happening. The librarian, a kind woman named Ruth, greeted us with a smile. "Max, haven't seen you two in a while." Her smile faded when she saw Max's condition. "Is he okay?" "He's been sick." I lied. "I'm actually here to do some research. Local history, specifically any unusual incidents or sightings in the area." Ruth's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, or maybe concern. "What kind of incidents?" "Strange ones. Things people might not have wanted to report officially." She was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then she nodded. "Follow me." Ruth led me to a back room filled with filing cabinets and old newspaper archives. She pulled out a worn folder and set it on the table between us. "This isn't in the digital system," she said quietly. "The library board decided some things were better left unindexed. But I remember you're a teacher. You've got a rational mind. So I'm trusting you with this." She opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of old newspaper articles, handwritten notes, and photographs. The earliest dated back to 1923. "They call them the Watcher incidents," Ruth explained. "Every few years, someone would report seeing something. A tall figure that appeared at dusk. It always started with animals going silent." I felt my stomach drop as I read through the documents. The pattern was consistent. Dogs would stop barking. Cats would hide. Then people would start seeing the figure. "What happened to them?" I asked. "The people who saw it." Ruth's face was grave. Some moved away. Some just stopped talking about it. But there were 3 deaths. Officially, they were heart attacks. But the families said their loved ones died of fear. She pulled out a photograph. It showed a group of people standing in front of a house. The photo was old and faded, but I could make out the details. And there, in the background, at the very edge of the frame, was a tall, dark shape. "This was taken in 1956, Ruth said. "The photographer swore he didn't see anything when he took the picture. But when it developed, there it was." My hands were shaking again as I looked at the photo. The figure was barely visible, like a smudge or an error in the film. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. "The last recorded incident was 12 years ago, Ruth continued. "A man named Robert Chun. He lived on Maple Street, about 6 blocks from your house." Maple Street. That was Mrs. Chun's street. My neighbor, who'd asked about Max. What happened to him? Primera whispered. "He disappeared. Just vanished one night. His dog was found in the house. Died of what the vet said was a stress-induced heart attack. And on his calendar, Robert had circled a date 3 weeks after he first reported seeing the figure." Ruth pointed to a handwritten note in the file. "He'd written 'It comes closer every night.' That was the last thing he ever wrote." I felt sick. Max pressed against my leg, as if he could sense my fear. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because you've seen it," Ruth said simply, "and because you need to know what you're dealing with. Knowledge is your only weapon here." "What is it? Where does it come from?" Ruth shook her head. "No one knows. Some of the older accounts called it a shadow walker, something that exists between worlds. Dravan to fear. The more you fear it, the more real it becomes." "And the dogs, why do they see it first?" "Animals sense things we don't. They see it before it's fully here. And the sight of it breaks something in them. They understand what it is in a way we can't. That's why they go silent." I looked down at Max. He was staring up at me, and in his eyes I saw confirmation. He knew. He'd always known. "How do I stop it?" I asked, desperately. Ruth closed the folder. "According to the records, you can't. Once it's chosen you, once it's started watching, it will keep coming. The only question is what you do with the time you have." I drove home in a daze. Ruth's words echoing in my mind. The folder sat on the passenger seat, full of photocopied evidence of something I wished I'd never learned about. Max was silent beside me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. When we got home, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started packing. Important documents, photos, clothes. I threw everything into suitcases with shaking hands. I couldn't stay here. I wouldn't wait to become another name in Ruth's file. But as I was carrying the first suitcase to my car, I stopped. The street light flickered, and there, at the end of my driveway, stood the figure. It was closer now. Much closer than it had been before. Close enough that I could see it was wrong in ways my brain refused to process. The proportions, it didn't make sense. The way it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The way it was looking directly at me. I dropped the suitcase. It hit the ground with a thud, spilling clothes across the driveway. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My legs had turned to stone. Max came to the door behind me and made a sound. Not quite a bark. Not quite a whimper. Just a broken noise that said everything. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, and I knew with absolute certainty that running wouldn't help. Ruth had been right. Once it chose you, it kept coming. I don't know how long we stood there. Time seemed to lose meaning. The sun was setting, and shadows were growing longer, and the thing at the end of my driveway was becoming more solid with each passing moment. Then, finally, I understood. The dogs went silent because barking wouldn't help. Warning wouldn't help. Fighting wouldn't help. The only thing to do was accept what was coming. Max had seen it first. Max had tried to warn me in the only way he could, by showing me that silence was the only response to something so beyond our comprehension. I backed slowly into my house, never taking my eyes off the figure. Max followed, pressing against my legs. I closed the door and locked it, knowing it wouldn't matter, because the thing outside didn't need doors. It existed in the spaces between, in the flickering of lights and the growing of shadows. That night, I sat with Max on the couch. I held him close, and he let me, his body still trembling. Outside, the street light flickered on and off, and each time it went dark, I knew the figure was closer. I picked up my phone. I needed to call someone. The police. They wouldn't believe me. My family. I couldn't explain this to them. Instead, I opened the forum where I'd found Shadow Watcher 73's post. I started typing. My dog saw it first. He's been silent for 8 days now. Tonight, I saw it at the end of my driveway. If anyone reads this and has experienced the same thing, please respond. I need to know what happens next. I hit send and set down my phone. Max looked up at me with those sad, knowing eyes. And in that moment, I understood why he'd stopped barking. Some things were too terrible for warnings. Some things could only be faced in silence. The streetlight flickered again, went dark, stayed dark longer this time. When it came back on, the figure was standing on my porch. I could hear it now. The wet breathing, the scraping of something against my door, and beneath it all, a sound like whispered words in a language I couldn't understand. Max pressed closer to me, his heart racing against my side. He made one last sound, barely audible. Not a bark, not a warning, just a quiet goodbye. And then, in the growing darkness of my living room, we waited together for whatever came next. The streetlight flickered one final time and went out completely.